Welcome. I'm Reena Agarwal, Robert E. McDonough Professor of Finance and founding director of the Psaros Center for Financial Markets and Policy. Based in Washington, D.C., at Georgetown University's McDonough School of Business, the Psaros Center for Financial Markets and Policy is the preeminent destination for unbiased expertise at the intersection of finance and policy. March is Women's History Month, and the Psaros Center is delighted to continue our Women Leaders in Business and Finance series. Georgetown students will interview some amazing women leaders for this series. The recordings of these interviews will be available on the center's website and on our YouTube channel. Now, it is my distinct pleasure to introduce someone who is truly inspiring. We are delighted to have Suzanne Donohoe for today's episode. Let me start with the most important part of the introduction. Suzanne earned her undergraduate degree at Georgetown University, and after that, she went on to get her MBA from the Wharton School at University of Pennsylvania. Suzanne is a member of the Georgetown University Board of Directors. She joined EQT Partners in 2023 as Chief Commercial Officer and Global Head at EQT. Prior to that, she was a partner and Global Head of Strategic Growth at KKR. She served on the firm's Investment Management and Distribution Committee. And prior to joining KKR, Suzanne was a partner and head of Goldman Sachs Asset Management International. She has been recognized by Barron's amongst the 100 most influential women in US finance. Ms. Donohoe is also co-chair of Georgetown University's Wall Street Alliance, one of the largest endowed scholarship pools Georgetown has to assist its students with financial aid. Suzanne, we're most grateful to you for your leadership of this very important initiative. We have two amazing students, Laura Epstein, who graduated from Warwick University with a degree in law and business, and she's currently a master's in management student at Georgetown University. Laura is joined with Kelly Grace Richardson. Kelly is a junior at Georgetown, double majoring in management and finance with a minor in government. Kelly has worked as a research assistant for 2 books, and she's on the rowing team. And she has been an amazing partner and helped us at the Psaros Center in so many different ways. So with that, Kelly Grace and Laura, take it away.
Awesome. Thank you, Reena. That was so nice and embarrassing a bit, but thank you.
Perfect. Thank you, Professor Agarwal. This was a great introduction to Mrs. Donohoe, and we appreciate all you do for Georgetown University as well. As the professor has introduced us, my name is Laura Epstein. I am originally from Argentina, and I did my undergraduate degree in law and business at the University of Warwick. I worked for a year adjacent to the financial services industry at Alpha Sites, which is an expert network. And now I'm pursuing my master's in management degree here at the Georgetown University, and very excited to connect with leaders in finance like yourself, and a pleasure to be doing this interview. Passing it on to Kelly Grace to introduce herself.
Hi, thank you so much for being here, Suzanne. I'm Kelly Grace. I'm from Seattle, Washington. I think Professor Agarwal did a great job introducing me. I don't have too much on my resume like you do, but I would love to ask the first question to kick off this discussion. So as a fellow Hoya, I was curious as to know how your experiences at Georgetown have influenced your professional journey and what lessons you've carried forward into your role as Chief Commercial Officer at EQT.
Well, thank you, Kelly and Lara. Really appreciate you ladies and the preparation that I know you must have done for this. When I think about my training at Georgetown, so to speak, I think the most valuable thing was really learning how to be a critical thinker, how to articulate one's ideas, being exposed to a breadth of disciplines and areas. I'm a true believer in a liberal arts education. I was a government major, history minor, took a few econ classes along the way, but that was about my exposure to finance before I left the Hilltop. But I think that the well-rounded and thoughtful education that students receive at Georgetown was excellent training for life after school, in whatever walk, and certainly those skills apply in finance.
Wonderful. Thank you for sharing that. And is there anything particular, maybe about your degree in government, maybe about policy or anything else that helped you in your first job at Goldman Sachs straight as a fresh undergraduate student graduate?
Well, I will say, I'm not sure being a government major was the asset that got me my first job, so to speak. But it wasn't a liability in any way. And I think that sometimes surprises folks when they think about finance. I can remember my very first day in the investment banking analyst program at Goldman Sachs, and they said 50% of you are finance and accounting majors, and 50% of you are poets. So they kind of created this bucket of everyone else, which meant we were the non-technical folks in the room. And they said, right now you might think you're at a big deficit, but in 6 months, the playing field will be totally level, if not before, because we're going to teach you what you need to know. And I actually remember conversation much later when I was serving on a earlier board at Georgetown. I think I was on the college board of advisors, and it may have been the dean of the college at that time said that he found that while many undergrads from Georgetown go to Wall Street without necessarily the same finance or accounting training that may be the hallmark of some other universities, although we have a very strong undergrad business program, so of course we offer that training as well. But many come from other disciplines. And he said one thing he had noted and he had been told later on is that 5 years out and further, the Georgetown students, no matter what training they've had, often are excelling in. So as they step into management roles, leadership roles, and the opportunity to collaborate and to articulate, and as opposed to just do one's job, but create a broader impact, that often the training that we collectively have received serves us very well. So I'm a big believer in what we do on the Hilltop and behind the Georgetown brand all over the world.
Absolutely. Similarly, in terms of sharing experience, knowledge over the course of 5 to 10 years into your career, I'd love to understand what you think makes a good mentor, and how you think young professionals should start to seek out their appropriate mentors once they're exiting college.
Sure. Yeah. Great question. I don't know that there's one right way to find a mentor. I think often they develop very naturally. It's someone that you form a connection with. You have natural chemistry with, that can always be helpful. Sometimes there are formalized mentoring programs that almost give you the setting to create that type of dialogue, and then hopefully it naturally develops from there. But I think for me, what's always made the most exceptional mentors have been those who have the ability to be very honest, to take a long view about you and your career and the skills that you need to develop. They may be someone who tells you what you don't want to hear in a difficult moment, but they have the courage to do that anyway. And that I think can be pretty important. Sometimes people shy away from conflict. And so if there's a tough conversation, they don't necessarily want to share it. But if you have an ambition that you're not on a path to realize, and they can help you understand that so that you can pivot and get on that path, I think actually they can be performing an incredibly valuable role. And often, sometimes mentors are also someone who are willing to open up their network of relationships or people that they have deep trust with to you. And that can be an incredibly important thing as well, because it really sort of extends your ability to have exposure and to learn from others. So I would say I've been incredibly fortunate, and try to keep those principles in mind when I'm spending time with younger people in our work.
That's wonderful. And speaking about networks and the importance of having that, to young women wanting to build their network in the financial space, what are your key recommendations? Where could we start with that as well? Is it going to events? Is it reaching out through methods like LinkedIn? I'm curious to hear your thoughts.
Sure. I guess I'm not so systematic about these things. I don't know that I've ever really been thoughtful about it, but honestly, I think the biggest thing is to be yourself, to form, to engage people. Maybe, my grandmother used to like to say, God gave you 2 ears and 1 mouth for a reason. So to me, that means listen as much as you talk, if not more, and understand what's going on with the other person. And in the process, you're much more likely to form a relationship that may go past a single conversation. And so I think, I think that's important. One thing I think there are generalizations that can be made. It's often been said that women tend to be more head down at work. They tend to be more focused on delivering the task at hand, and maybe spend less time thinking about, oh, I'm going to go out and build my network. And so, a suggestion would just be to be a little bit more deliberate about, if you think about your work month, let's say, I won't say your work day or your work week, but over the span of a month or 2 or 3, imagining that there's some portion of your time where it's smart to be devoted to the future as opposed to the current task at hand. And so then being a little bit more deliberate about how you spend that future time, I think might be a helpful note to offer to people. And that's probably the most practical thing I could recommend when I think about that.
Thank you so much. I'm very sure that we'll all take your advice in terms of networking and making sure it's organic. I would love to shift towards your current role at EQT. I know EQT is very committed to facilitating discourse and sharing results, even if they're not necessarily perfect. So I would love to understand how you kind of ensure the transparency and open communication within your own team, and then also with the external stakeholders of EQT.
That's a great question. One of our values is explicitly, we have 5 values, and one is explicitly to be transparent. And so I actually think that creating that as an explicit value means it sits high on people's list and they remember it. It's something that's a principle that guides decision making. And another saying that we like to repeat here, and I think also goes to the heart of your question, this comes from our founder, who's a gentleman named Connie Johnson, and he likes to say, everything can always be improved everywhere at all times. And he says it that way, by the way. And if you think about that concept, if people are regularly repeating that concept, what does it do? It makes it a safe thing to admit that something's imperfect or something went wrong, right? If you start with the principle that everything can be improved, then you also are admitting that there's room for error, and there's room to learn, and there's room to grow. And so I actually think that because of that value of transparency and that everything can always be improved mantra, we end up creating an environment where we talk all the time about our learnings and about what we could have done differently. And particularly when something's hard, there's sometimes I don't know, okay, let's get through the task, and then we're all committing that we're going to get together and figure out how we make it better next time. So we try to operate with that ethos. It does help to bring what is naturally otherwise, people can get defensive if they think that a body of work or an individual or situation's being critiqued. And I think it helps to take down that defensive wall. And frankly, it also just makes it easier and more fun to work here. So I am valuing those things about our culture.
That is great. Thanks for sharing that as well. As it was recently reported by the FT and many other places that EQT finalized a 22 billion fundraise. I would love it if you could share a little bit about your experience engaging in that and any key highlights of doing that race.
Sure. Yeah. Well, thanks for calling that out. That was some big news for us this week. And maybe just to contextualize for those that may know our business less well, our business is taking capital from a variety of different types of investors around the world and deploying it in long-term asset classes. So it could be private equity, could be infrastructure, could be real estate, and returning that capital and then profits on that capital over a reasonably long period of time. Let's call it 5 to 10 years. And our job is to return profits that are much more substantial than what they might have earned in alternative buckets, like let's say in public equity markets. We're blessed. We've had a 30-year record of strong investment performance. And so that's the single biggest factor that contributes to a success, like the fundraise you just mentioned. We're blessed with that strong investment performance that's been very consistent, and our clients know that. So we were both benefiting from our clients trusting us with more money, and then also a lot of new clients coming our way. What I would say is anything of such a scale, and it was a pretty meaningful raise in our context, also requires a massive amount of teamwork and trust building with a lot of external participants. So in the end, I think we had 300 clients in that strategy, and we told our story for a couple of years. So it was a lot of work, and I think we will need to celebrate it appropriately at the right time. And meanwhile, we're on to the next one. But thanks for calling it out.
Thank you. So as we're getting to the end of our Q&A session, I would love to get your final pieces of advice for people who are trying to navigate their career path and going forward into the future.
Sure. Well, I guess first thing is I'd say if you're curious about something, give it a try. Sometimes we can tell ourselves lots of reasons why we're not going to be good at something, but instead try to focus on all the reasons that you might have something valuable to contribute. So go in with a positive attitude. I'd say, ask questions, ask for feedback, value relationships. As you make decisions about different opportunities that you might be offered in a new role, embrace them. I had the opportunity to live abroad and to work in various different businesses at different times in my career, and I've never regretted taking the opportunity, never regretted it. And, I think collecting feedback along the way, really trying to internalize and listen to that feedback to be able to show up at work and offer even more the next day is pretty important. But the most important things are really to value the people around you, figure out how you get the most out of your colleagues, be the teammate you want to be, be the teammate you'd like to have, I guess is a better way to say that, and have fun along the way. That would be my biggest bit of advice. It's just so much better if you can be passionate and joyful at work every day. it's a lot of our lives that we spend at work. So you want to make sure, you know, you're having fun and enjoying it along the way.
Perfect. I'm not sure if we have time for one last final question, but this is gonna be very quick,
Okay.
if it's possible. What is there one particular book that you would recommend students entering the workforce to read?
Oh, well, I'm a little obsessed with a book I read not that long ago called Why We Sleep. That may sound weird, but it's ironic because I can remember when I was interviewing for my first job, my job at Goldman Sachs out of Georgetown, I remember marketing myself in part based on the fact that I could operate with little sleep. I genuinely believed, and in fact, it probably was really a selling point because certainly the first few years at that point in time, you know, it could be a little bit brutal lifestyle wise. And I truly do function pretty well on lower amounts of sleep. But I think as I've gotten older, I'm starting to appreciate that might not always be the best thing for you. So I read this book called Why We Sleep. It's by a guy named Matthew Walker, who I think is a neuroscientist. And I do have to say, it's now made me a little obsessed when I'm not getting to sleep, that I need to do a better job of that because it's super valuable to your brain, your health, your body, obviously. So don't deprive yourself in the same way that you need nutrition and exercise. That's important too.
Perfect. Thank you so much for sharing that.
That was excellent. Yeah, thank you so much to Kelly Grace, Lara, and of course, Suzanne. You always have such great advice to give. So this was absolutely fantastic, and what an opportunity for our students to have.